My name is Caroline Whitaker, and this is my story. I used to leave the porch light on every night for a man who never came home on time. It became a kind of ritual, me standing in the doorway of our small blue house on Maple Ridge Road, watching the light spill out into the fog like some fragile promise. I told myself it meant hope. My son Mason used to ask, "Mom, who's that for?" And I'd say, "Just in case your dad remembers where home is." After the divorce, I told myself I'd never do that again. I'd stop waiting. But life in a small Ohio town has a funny way of circling back, of pulling old ghosts up from the gravel roads and front porches. It had been 3 years since Daniel left. 3 years since I'd packed his boxes, signed the papers, and stood in that same doorway alone. Mason was 9 now, smart, sensitive, and old enough to sense that the word temporary never meant what adults said it did. When Daniel called that February afternoon to ask if he could stay for a little while, my first instinct was to hang up. But then he said, "Caroline, I've got nowhere else to go right now, just until I get my feet under me again." I stared at the bills scattered on the kitchen table, the electric shutoff notice half hidden under a stack of unopened envelopes. Mason's asthma medicine wasn't cheap, and my hours at the diner had been cut again. I told myself it was only a spare room, 4 walls, a bed, and a door I could close. "All right," I said, "but it's just temporary." He showed up 2 days later with a duffel bag and that same crooked smile that used to melt my resolve. His hair was shorter, flecked with gray, and he'd traded his mechanic's coveralls for neat flannel shirts and jeans that looked new. Mason nearly tackled him at the door, and for a moment I saw a flash of what we used to be, a family, framed by the light from that damn porch. The first week was awkward but manageable. Daniel cooked breakfast, helped Mason with his math homework, and even fixed the leaky sink I'd been ignoring. It was easy to fall into the rhythm of old habits, the sound of a man's footsteps in the hallway, his toothbrush by the sink, the smell of aftershave in the mornings. I hated how comforting it felt. Then one morning, I noticed his phone propped up on the kitchen counter, camera facing us. Mason was flipping pancakes, and Daniel was saying, "Tell them how you like your dad's secret recipe, buddy." "Them?" I asked, frowning. "Oh," he said casually, "just recording for this thing I'm doing online. Kind of a vlog. People like real family moments. Nothing fancy. I didn't think much of it at first. Everyone online was sharing pieces of their lives these days. Maybe it was his new hobby, but then I started seeing little changes. His constant checking of views, the way he'd ask Mason to redo things, like hugging him at the door or laughing harder at some joke. "Do it again, son. This time, smile bigger," he'd say. And Mason would comply, confused but eager to please. A week later, a woman showed up. Her name was Sabrina, and she introduced herself as Daniel's fiancée. I nearly dropped the dish towel in my hand. "You're engaged?" I managed. She gave a bright, too-white smile. "Oh, we're just taking it slow. Daniel said you two were really good friends now." Friends. That word hung in the air like cigarette smoke. Mason, of course, was thrilled. Sabrina brought gifts, new sneakers, a baseball glove, and she had a soft voice that seemed rehearsed for the camera. Because yes, she was always on camera. I'd catch them filming little clips in the living room, blended family game night, or Dad surprises son with baseball gear. At first, I ignored it. Maybe this was his version of moving on, and if Mason was happy, maybe it didn't matter. But then I saw one of the videos online. Someone from the diner showed me on her phone, laughing. "Caroline, did you know you're on YouTube?" she said. My heart stopped. There I was, back turned, washing dishes while Daniel and Sabrina smiled in the foreground. The caption read, "My ex-wife lets me stay so I can be a better dad." It had over 84,000 views. The comments burned into me. "She looks bitter, poor guy. He's just trying to be there for his kid. She should be grateful." I couldn't breathe. That night, I confronted him. "Daniel, you need to stop filming in my house." He looked up from his laptop, calm as ever. "It's harmless, Caroline. You're not even really in the shots. You filmed me without my permission. Caroline, it's our family. People love the story. The devoted dad rebuilding his bond with his son, the peaceful co-parenting thing. Sponsors are reaching out. Do you know what that could mean for Mason?" I did. It meant he was selling a lie. He leaned back in his chair. "I'm finally doing something right, and you can't stand it, can you?" That's when I realized he didn't come back because he needed a place to stay. He came back for content. From that night on, the air in the house changed. I caught him whispering to Mason before bed, coaching him on lines. Just say you're proud of me, okay? Organ. Tell them how happy you are I'm home. The cameras were everywhere, tiny black dots I hadn't noticed before, one near the TV, another above the kitchen doorway. I pulled one down and confronted him again, but he brushed it off as a security camera. By the second month, the sponsorship started rolling in. Free meals, new furniture, even a deal with a family brand. I watched strangers in the comments call him Dad of the Year, while my own name became a punchline. He moved Sabrina into the spare room, said it was for appearances. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw every camera out the window. But Mason, my sweet boy, was caught in the middle, smiling on cue because he thought that's what made everyone happy. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat on the porch steps, staring at that stupid light glowing above me. For years, I'd left it on for Daniel. Now, it felt like it was mocking me, illuminating the life he was rewriting one video at a time. That's when something in me shifted. If he wanted to play storyteller, then I'd learn to tell my own. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and Mason's soft breathing down the hall. Daniel's door was shut, a faint glow leaking from the bottom. Editing, no doubt. He stayed up most nights now, his voice whispering into a mic, rehearsing lines about redemption and second chances. I made coffee, sat at the table, and watched the porch light fade in the first wash of gray. I opened my phone and typed his name into the search bar. The results hit me like a gut punch. Daniel Whitaker, family first. Over 200,000 subscribers. A banner photo of him and Mason, all smiles. A tagline, building bridges, one day at a time. There were dozens of videos. Some thumbnails showed Mason hugging Daniel. Others showed Sabrina laughing with a plate of cookies. And then there were titles like, Co-parenting done right, A father's second chance, Why I'll never give up on my family. My face appeared in 5 of them. Always blurred, always in the background, but unmistakable. In one, I was hanging laundry on the line, expression tired and gray. The comments were merciless. I closed the app, my fingers trembling. He was making money. Real money. Sponsors, ads, brand deals. All on the back of our lives. Our pain, our home. That day at the diner, I barely spoke. My boss, Trish, kept giving me side glances as I poured coffee and wiped counters. When my shift ended, she slipped me a folded napkin. Inside was a note. You don't deserve that. Tell your story too. I stared at it the entire bus ride home. That night, Daniel was in the kitchen, camera in hand, filming Mason doing homework. Sabrina sat at the counter scrolling through her phone. I said, Mason, it's bedtime. Daniel frowned. Babe, we're almost done. I'm not your babe, I said. Mason's done. He smirked, turned the camera toward me. Caroline's tired, folks. Been a long day, huh? I froze. That red light on the camera lens looked like a target. Turn it off, I said. He didn't. Turn it off, Daniel. The words came sharper than I intended. Mason's eyes darted between us. Daniel finally lowered the camera, jaw tight. I went to Mason's room and shut the door behind me. He sat on the edge of the bed, small shoulders hunched. Am I in trouble, he asked. No, baby, you're not. He nodded, but I could see the confusion in his eyes. I tucked him in, smoothed his hair, and whispered, You don't have to perform for anyone. You just be you. When I left his room, Daniel was waiting in the hall. You just cost me a clip, he said flatly. I'm not living in your movie, Daniel. This isn't about you, Caroline. This is for Mason. People love him. You mean they love you through him. He smiled without warmth. Believe what you want. But the sponsors see a wholesome family. You think they'll care about your bitterness? I walked past him, heart pounding, into my room. I locked the door and leaned against it, shaking. He was right about one thing. The internet didn't care about truth, just the version that got the most likes. But truth was something I still had, and I was going to use it. The next morning, I called in sick to the diner. After Mason left for school, I sat at the kitchen table with my old laptop and typed in a search. How to upload videos. It wasn't hard. I made an account, no face, no name, just Porch Light Mom. My first video was shaky and simple, a recording of our kitchen, one of Daniel's hidden cameras in my hand. I spoke softly, directly into the lens. This is my home. I didn't agree to be filmed. What you see online isn't the truth. I showed his setup, the tripods, the lights, the angles where I'd caught him staging moments. I ended with a shot of Mason's room, quiet and untouched. This is where my son actually lives, not on a screen. I didn't expect it to go anywhere. I didn't even tell Trish. I just posted it and went about my day. By that evening, it had over 10,000 views. The comments were different this time. People noticed the stillness, the sadness. Some recognized the house. Others asked if I was okay. Someone linked Daniel's channel. Then someone else commented, "So this is the other side." When Daniel saw it, he lost it. He burst into the living room, phone in hand, shouting, "What the hell is this, Caroline?" My heart raced, but I stood my ground. "The truth," I said. "You're trying to ruin me." "I didn't have to. You did that yourself." He laughed, harsh and hollow. "Do you even know what you've done? The sponsors are calling. They're threatening to pull out." "Good." His face darkened. "You think you're some hero? Nobody cares about your sad little story." I looked at him then, really looked. The man who once fixed our sink, who used to hold Mason's tiny hand at the park. But that man was gone, replaced by someone addicted to validation, to being seen. "Get out," I said quietly. He froze. "You heard me. Get out of my house." He stormed off, slamming doors, shouting about betrayal and money and how I'd regret it. But I didn't chase him. I just stood in the doorway, the porch light flickering above me. When the door finally shut behind him, the silence was so pure it almost hurt. I thought it was over then, but I was wrong. The next morning, Mason ran into the kitchen holding his tablet. "Mom, look, everyone's talking about us." There it was, my face, Daniel's channel, 1,000 comments arguing over who was telling the truth. Porch Light Mom was trending. I felt sick. That night, I went out to the porch again, sat on the steps under that light that refused to burn out. The town was quiet, a single car humming somewhere down the road. I whispered to myself, this isn't about revenge. This is about freedom. And for the first time in years, I meant it. Still, I knew Daniel wouldn't go quietly. Men like him never do. Daniel didn't disappear. For a few blessed days, the house was calm again. Mason went to school without rehearsing his smile, and I could finally drink my coffee without a camera staring me down. But quiet never lasts when a man like Daniel feels cornered. By the third day, I started getting emails, unknown senders, links, screenshots, and words that made my stomach twist. She's lying. Crazy ex. Jealous mom ruining her kid's future. Daniel had posted another video. I opened it, though my hands trembled so much I could barely click. The title burned across the screen, "Fighting for My Son, The Truth About Porch Light Mom." The thumbnail was him sitting on Mason's bed, his hand on our son's shoulder. Mason looked uncomfortable, eyes red. Daniel started speaking in that soft, rehearsed voice I used to mistake for sincerity. He said he'd been trying to rebuild his life, that he'd moved in temporarily to co-parent, and that I, his poor, unstable ex-wife, had twisted everything. He said I was jealous of his success, that I'd stolen private moments and exploited Mason's image out of spite. At the end, he looked into the camera with glassy eyes and said, "I just want peace for my son." That's all I've ever wanted. It had over 1 million views by noon. By the time I picked Mason up from school, people were whispering. One of the other moms gave me a tight, pitying smile. The principal pulled me aside and asked if everything at home was safe and stable. That night, Mason sat across from me at the table, his dinner untouched. "Dad said you hate him," he whispered. "He said you don't want us to be happy." My throat ached. I wanted to tell him everything, that his father was lying, that the man on the screen wasn't the man I married. But what would that do to a 10-year-old boy who still loved his dad? I reached across the table and took his hand. "I don't hate your dad," I said softly. "But sometimes people care more about being seen than about being good." He didn't look up. "I just want it to stop, Mom." "Me too, sweetheart." After he went to bed, I sat in the living room, the glow of the porch light seeping in through the blinds. I opened my laptop. My video had over 2 million views now, too. The comments were divided, half defending Daniel, half defending me. But buried among them were private messages, stories from other women. One said, "He reminds me of my ex, always performing, always twisting." Another wrote, "Please don't stop. You're helping more of us than you know." That was the night I decided I wasn't going to stop. The next morning, I filmed again, this time in daylight, sitting at the kitchen table where everything had started. No makeup, no filters. I spoke about control, about how easy it was for someone to make you doubt your own memories when they told their version loud enough. I said I wasn't perfect, but I was done being quiet. Then I showed the receipts, screenshots of Daniel's emails, his brand deals, the contracts he'd forged my signature on. I blurred out Mason's face in every frame. The video went viral overnight. News outlets started calling. One even showed up at the diner asking for comment. I didn't talk to them, but others did. People who'd known Daniel, old coworkers, even Sabrina. It turned out she hadn't known half of what he'd been doing. She left him, and in one raw post, she confirmed everything I'd said, and more. She showed the scripts he'd written for Mason, the fake apology drafts he'd planned to post later to boost engagement. By the end of the week, every sponsorship deal he had collapsed. But victory didn't feel like I thought it would. Mason stopped eating dinner with me. He missed his dad, even after everything. I couldn't blame him. I'd loved Daniel once too. That kind of love doesn't die easily. It just changes shape until it's something like sorrow. Then came the phone call. It was nearly midnight. Daniel's name flashed across the screen. For a long moment, I just stared at it. Then I answered. "You happy now?" he asked. His voice was rough, tired. "You destroyed everything." "No, Daniel, you did. You think they love you? The internet eats people alive. They'll turn on you next." "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'll still have my son." There was a long silence. Then he said, "You think Mason's gonna forgive you when he's older? When he realizes what you cost him?" I hung up before I could hear the rest. Afterward, I sat on the porch again. The light above me buzzed faintly, a moth circling it in slow, desperate loops. For years, that light had been my symbol of waiting, for Daniel to come home, for peace, for closure. But maybe it had just been a beacon for pain. I went back inside and unplugged the bulb. The night swallowed the porch whole, quiet and deep. But even in the dark, I felt lighter. The next morning, Mason asked where the light had gone. I told him, "We don't need it anymore." He looked confused, then nodded. Over the next few weeks, Daniel disappeared from the internet. His channel was taken down, his account suspended. People moved on, as they always do. The views, the comments, the chaos, all faded like static after a storm. Mason and I started rebuilding our routines. Mornings were slow again. Breakfast wasn't filmed. I went back to work. He joined a local baseball team. Real games this time, no cameras. Sometimes I'd catch him looking toward the front door, expecting his dad to walk in. I never told him he wouldn't. Some truths a child should learn gently, not all at once. And though I told myself I was done with the internet, I kept one last upload saved on my phone. Not public, just for me. It was a video I filmed on a quiet Sunday morning. Mason playing catch in the yard, laughter echoing off the trees. No editing, no commentary, no fake smiles, just life. When I watched it back, I realized something. The real story had never been about revenge. It was about reclaiming the quiet. Still, part of me knew Daniel wasn't finished. Men like him always find an audience somewhere. But if he ever tried again, the truth was already out there, and this time it wasn't his to shape. Spring came late that year, as if the world itself had been holding its breath. The snow melted into gray slush, and the maple trees outside the house began to bud again. Life had a way of crawling back, even after chaos. Mason was thriving. He laughed more now, real laughter that didn't sound rehearsed. He rode his bike to school with his friends, came home with dirt on his jeans and stories about baseball practice. Sometimes, when I saw him smiling under the afternoon sun, I felt this fierce kind of pride. Like we'd survived something no one else could ever fully understand. I'd stopped checking the internet. My video was still there, still being shared, but I didn't read the comments anymore. I'd learned that peace doesn't come from proving yourself. It comes from choosing silence after the noise. Still, reminders of Daniel popped up now and then. A stranger at the grocery store would recognize me, hesitate, then say quietly, "You did the right thing." Or someone at the diner would ask if it was true he'd moved out of state. I'd nod, keep my answers short, and go back to pouring coffee. The truth was, I didn't know where he'd gone. And for the first time in years, I didn't care. Then, one rainy Thursday evening, a small brown package arrived. No return address, just my name, written in the handwriting I'd once known better than my own. I stood in the kitchen for a long time before opening it. Inside was a USB drive and a folded piece of paper. The note said only this: "For Mason, no tricks, just goodbye." My first instinct was to throw it out. But Mason deserved honesty, and if this was Daniel's way of making peace, then maybe it was time. That night, after dinner, I plugged the drive into my laptop. Mason sat beside me, knees pulled to his chest. The video started with a shaky frame. Daniel, sitting in his truck, parked somewhere that looked cold and lonely. He spoke quietly without the practiced tone I'd grown to hate. "Hey, buddy. If you're watching this, I just want to say I'm sorry. Not just for what happened online, but for everything before that. I thought if I made people love me again, I'd start loving myself. But that's not how it works. You were enough, Mason. You always were." He paused, took a breath. "Tell your mom I'm sorry, too. She deserved better than what I gave her. Both of you did." Then he smiled, tired and small. "Take care of each other, and don't leave the porch light on for me anymore. I'll find my own way." The screen went black. Mason leaned against me, silent. I wrapped my arm around him and held him until he fell asleep. When I finally closed the laptop, the house was quiet again. The kind of quiet that didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. A few days later, we buried the drive at the edge of the yard, under the old oak tree. Mason said it felt like the right thing to do. I agreed. After that, life moved forward, the way it always does. The diner got busier, Mason grew taller, and summer rolled in with its heavy heat. Some evenings, I'd sit on the porch with a glass of iced tea, watching the sky turn gold. The porch light fixture was still there, but the bulb was gone. I never replaced it. Neighbors sometimes asked why I kept it dark. I'd just smile and say, "Because I'm not waiting anymore." One evening, near dusk, I was sitting there when Mason joined me. He was quiet for a while, then said, "Do you ever miss him?" I thought about it. The laughter, the first years of marriage, the way he used to hold our baby like the world would stop spinning if he let go. I thought about the lies, the cameras, the betrayal. Sometimes, I said. "But missing someone doesn't mean you want them back." He nodded, thinking that over, then leaned his head on my shoulder. The porch creaked softly beneath us, the smell of lilacs drifting through the warm air. "You know," he said, "you're the strongest person I know." I smiled, blinking away the sting in my eyes. "I'm just someone who got tired of being silent." He grinned. "Same thing, isn't it?" I laughed, really laughed. The kind that fills your chest and makes you forget for a second how heavy the world can be. The sky darkened, and for the first time in years, the porch light stayed off without feeling like a loss. The stars above were enough. Later that night, as I tucked Mason into bed, he whispered, "I'm glad you told your story, Mom." "Me too," I said, "because every truth deserves its turn in the light." And when I stepped outside one last time before sleep, the porch sat in quiet darkness. No waiting, no ghosts, no cameras, just the sound of crickets and the soft hum of peace. I looked up at the spot where the bulb used to glow and thought, he was right about one thing. We don't need to leave the light on anymore. Then I closed the door behind me and slept peacefully for the first time in years.